I lost $165,000 in one day to save her life. You won't believe what happened next. I need to tell you about a number that ruled my life for 12 years. $165,000. Not millions. Not enough to retire on, or buy a yacht, or do whatever rich people do with their money. Just enough to finally feel like maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. That money sat in a certificate of deposit at First National Bank, collecting interest at a rate that would make today's investors laugh. But back when Sarah and I opened it, that CD felt like planting a flag on our future. We were 30 years old, newly married, and stupid enough to believe that discipline and patience were all you needed to get ahead in this country. 12 years. Do you know what you give up in 12 years? We gave up Hawaii. We gave up that trip to Europe everyone takes for their 10th anniversary. We gave up replacing my 2006 Honda Civic, even though the check engine light has been on since the Obama administration. And the air conditioning only works if you hit the dashboard at exactly the right angle. We gave up moving out of our apartment where the walls are so thin I can hear our neighbor Greg's entire phone conversations with his mother every Sunday at 9 in the morning. But tomorrow, finally, that CD matured. Tomorrow, we were going to walk into that bank and walk out with enough money for a down payment on an actual house. A place where we could not hear Greg discussing his digestive issues through the drywall. Sarah had spreadsheets. My wife loves spreadsheets the way some people love their pets. She had calculated our mortgage options, property tax estimates, and even factored in the cost of a new lawnmower, because apparently that is what homeowners do. They mow things. The night before the big day, she had 3 browser tabs open showing houses in our price range, each one color-coded by proximity to her work, my work, and the good grocery store that does not smell like sadness. I loved watching her plan. Her face got this focused expression, like she was solving a puzzle only she could see. After 12 years of microwave dinners and saying no to every fun thing our friends did, we were finally about to say yes to something big. But I need to back up and tell you about Aunt Marge, because none of what happened makes sense without understanding her. Marge was my father's sister, and the family treated her like a weird heirloom nobody wanted but felt obligated to keep. She was 74, lived alone in a small house in the suburbs that always smelled like lavender and old books, and she believed in something she called quantum wealth attraction. I am not making this up. She had vision boards. She had crystals arranged on her windowsills. She burned sage and wrote affirmations on index cards and stuck them to her bathroom mirror. Every time I visited, there was some new manifestation ritual she had learned from a YouTube channel or a library book about the universe providing abundance. My sister Karen thought Marge was senile. My parents thought she was an embarrassment, but I loved her. Marge wore scarves in colors that hurt your eyes. Bright purple, electric orange. Once she showed up to Christmas dinner in a turquoise wrap that looked like a parrot had exploded. She did not care what anyone thought. While my father lectured about fiscal responsibility and Karen bragged about her leased BMW, Marge would sit there with a little smile, sipping her tea, completely unbothered. She lived on Social Security and a tiny pension from 40 years working as a librarian. Her house was paid off but falling apart. The porch sagged. The roof leaked. The kitchen cabinets were from 1975. But she refused every offer of financial help from the family. And believe me, those offers came with strings attached. My mother liked to say that if Marge had been smarter with money, she would not be living like a bohemian in her 70s. My father said poverty was a choice. Karen said Marge was a cautionary tale about what happens when you do not invest properly. I just thought she was the only one in the family who seemed genuinely happy. 3 years ago, Marge asked me to come over for tea. This was unusual because Marge usually just showed up unannounced with homemade cookies that tasted like cardboard and good intentions. But this time she wanted me to come to her house, and she wanted me to come alone. I remember sitting in her kitchen with the afternoon light coming through those dusty windows, surrounded by her weird collection of ceramic cats and dream catchers. She slid a manila folder across the table. It was labeled Medical Power of Attorney in her careful librarian handwriting. She told me she had been thinking about getting older and what would happen if something went wrong. She said she trusted me to make decisions for her medical care if she ever could not make them herself. She said I was the only one in the family who actually listened when she talked instead of just waiting for her to die so they could argue over her stuff. That last part stung because it was true. I asked her why she did not choose my parents or Karen. Marge got this look on her face, tired and knowing. She told me that 3 weeks earlier, Karen had come to visit and spent 2 hours trying to convince her to sell the house and move into a retirement community. Not because Karen was worried about Marge's safety, because Karen had already looked up the property value and calculated her inheritance share. Marge said she knew my parents were the same way, waiting, calculating, treating her like an asset that had not yet liquidated. But me, she said, I visited because I wanted to. I listened to her stories about library patrons and her manifestation journeys and her theories about cosmic abundance. I did not check my watch. I did not change the subject to something more practical. I just let her be herself. She looked me right in the eyes and told me that if she ever lost her mind, she wanted me making the calls, not the vultures, not the people who measured her worth in real estate equity. Me, I signed the papers. I made jokes about how she was going to outlive us all out of sheer stubbornness. I threw the folder in my glove compartment and honestly forgot about it. That was 3 years ago. Last Sunday, my parents hosted a barbecue. This is a tradition they have maintained for 30 years. Every first Sunday of the month from May through September, weather permitting. It is less about family bonding and more about my father showing off his expensive grill and my mother showing off her expensive patio furniture. Marge showed up wearing a sunshine yellow scarf and a dress covered in flowers. She brought a Jell-O salad that nobody ate. Karen was already there with her husband, Brad, who works in medical device sales and will tell you about it within 90 seconds of meeting you. Sarah and I arrived late because my car decided the battery was more a suggestion than a requirement. We got it jumped and drove over smelling like anxiety and frustration. The thing about these family gatherings is they follow a script. My father grills expensive steaks while talking about the stock market. My mother complains about their neighbors in a way that makes it clear she thinks she is better than everyone on her street. Karen talks about her kids' achievements in a voice that is designed to make you feel inadequate about your own life choices. And Marge sits in the corner of the patio, smiling like she knows a secret the rest of us are too stressed to understand. That day, Karen was on fire. She had just leased a new car, something German and complicated, and she spent 20 minutes describing the leather interior and the dashboard technology and the payment plan she had negotiated. She kept saying it was an investment in her professional image. My father nodded along like she had just explained cryptocurrency to a caveman. He turned to me and asked how my vehicle situation was going, which is his polite way of asking why I am still driving a car that is old enough to vote. I told him the Civic was running fine. This was a lie. The Civic was held together by duct tape and prayer. But I was not about to explain our financial strategy to a man who thought struggling meant his golf club raised the membership fees. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Tomorrow, her grip said, tomorrow we get our money and start over. My father launched into one of his speeches about how poverty is a choice. How anyone can build wealth if they just work hard enough and make smart decisions. How people who complain about money are really complaining about their own lack of discipline. He did not look at Marge when he said this. He did not have to. Marge just smiled. She took a sip of her iced tea and said something that I will never forget. She said the universe had already written her a check. The mail was just delayed. Karen actually laughed. She laughed like Marge had told a joke. My mother got this pinched expression she gets when something embarrasses her. My father changed the subject to interest rates. But I looked at Marge, and she winked at me. Actually winked. Like we were in on something together. Sarah and I left the barbecue early. We sat in our apartment that night with her laptop open, looking at houses. There was one we both loved. 3 bedrooms, small yard, quiet street. It needed work, but it had good bones. Sarah kept zooming in on the photos of the kitchen, pointing out where we could put things, how we could make it ours. We were going to call the realtor first thing in the morning, right after we went to the bank. We had it all planned out. 12 years of planning, finally coming together. I remember thinking that maybe my father was right about discipline and patience. Maybe we had done everything correctly. Maybe the system actually worked if you just played by the rules long enough. My phone rang at 11:47 at night. I know the exact time because I looked at the screen and saw unknown number and almost did not answer. Sarah was already asleep next to me. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of Greg's television through the wall. I answered. The voice on the other end was professional and calm in that way that immediately tells you something is very wrong. She identified herself as calling from County General Hospital. She asked if I was Mark and if I knew a Marge. My stomach dropped into my shoes. The nurse told me Marge had been brought in by ambulance. A neighbor had found her collapsed on her front porch. She was stable now, but they needed family members to come in right away. I woke Sarah up. I do not remember getting dressed or grabbing my keys or starting the car. I just remember Sarah sitting next to me in the passenger seat, her hand on my leg, as I drove 15 miles over the speed limit toward the hospital. The emergency room at County General at midnight is its own special kind of hell. Fluorescent lights that make everyone look sick. The smell of disinfectant trying to cover up something worse. People in various states of crisis, sitting in plastic chairs, waiting. We ran to the front desk. I gave them Marge's name. The woman at the desk had the dead eyes of someone who had worked too many double shifts. She typed slowly, checked her screen, and told us to wait. But I did not wait. I saw them down the hallway. My parents. My father in his weekend casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother with her arms crossed. And both of them arguing with a man in a white coat who looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. A nurse appeared next to us. Young, tired, with a badge that said her name was Jessica. She looked at me and Sarah standing there and asked a question that I would later realize changed everything. She asked who the family was. I started to answer. I started to explain that Marge was my aunt, and these were my parents, and we were all family. We were all here for her. But then I saw my father's face. He was not worried. He was not scared or sad, or any of the things you're supposed to be when someone you love is in the emergency room. He looked annoyed. My mother saw us approaching. Her expression shifted from irritation to something like relief, but not the good kind. The kind that said, finally, someone else can deal with this. I walked toward them with Sarah right behind me. The doctor they had been arguing with looked up. My father started to say something, and I realized that the manila folder in my glove compartment, the one I had forgotten about for 3 years, was about to become the most important document of my life. But I did not know that yet. Right then, all I knew was that Marge was somewhere behind those doors, and my family was out here arguing about something, and nothing about this felt right. The nurse named Jessica touched my arm. She asked again, more insistent this time, "Who here is the next of kin?" The doctor's name was Ramon. Dr. Amira Ramon, according to the ID badge clipped to her white coat. She looked like she had been awake for about 72 hours straight. Her eyes had that hollow quality you see in people who watch too many humans die and not enough of them live. She pulled us into a consultation room that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Those rooms are always the same. Beige walls, a box of tissues on the table that has seen too much use, a diagram of the human body that somehow makes everything look both simple and terrifying. My parents sat on one side, Karen and Brad on the other. Sarah and I stood by the door because there were not enough chairs, and I did not want to sit anyway. My legs felt like they needed to move, or I would explode. Dr. Ramon explained that Marge had been stabilized. That word, stabilized, it sounds good until you realize it just means they stopped you from dying in the next 10 minutes. It does not mean you are fixed. It means you are in a holding pattern between living and not living, waiting for someone to decide which direction you are headed. She had suffered what they call an acute cardiac event. Her aortic valve had basically given up. At 74, with her medical history, this was not exactly shocking news to the medical team. Hearts were out. Valves fail. This is what happens when you use something for 3/4 of a century. The standard protocol was clear. They had stabilized her under EMTLA, the federal law that requires emergency rooms to treat anyone who shows up dying, regardless of ability to pay. But now she was stable, and stable meant decisions had to be made. For someone Marge's age on Medicare, the recommended course of treatment was medical management. That is what Dr. Amon called it, medical management. Like Marge was a portfolio that needed adjusting instead of a human being who made Jell-O salads and believed in cosmic abundance. Medical management meant medications to reduce the strain on her heart. It meant palliative care. It meant transitioning her to a skilled nursing facility where she would be kept comfortable while her heart slowly failed over the next 2 to 3 months. My mother nodded along like this made perfect sense. My father asked about the quality of local nursing homes. Karen pulled out her phone and started Googling hospice care options. And I wanted to scream. Dr. Amon kept talking. She was good at her job. I will give her that. She did not sugarcoat things, but she also did not sound cruel. She sounded tired. Tired of having this conversation with families who had to choose between medical miracles and financial ruin. She explained there was an alternative option, a newer procedure, transcatheter aortic valve replacement. TAVR, they called it. Instead of cracking open the chest like traditional surgery, they would go into an artery and essentially install a new valve while the heart was still beating. It was minimally invasive. It had excellent outcomes for patients Marge's age. She could potentially have years of quality life ahead of her. The word potentially hung in the air like a promise that might be a lie. Here is where American healthcare shows you exactly what it thinks of human life. Medicare had denied authorization for procedure, not because it would not work, not because Marge was too sick or too old. They denied it because the procedure was classified as not medically necessary for her condition. The fact that she would die without it was apparently not relevant to the definition of necessary. There was another option, Dr. Amon said. Her voice got quieter. We could pay out of pocket. Private pay. The hospital required $150,000 up front before they would schedule the procedure. That did not include the post-op care, the rehabilitation, the follow-up appointments, or any complications. $150,000. That number sat in my chest like a stone. My father spoke first. He asked if the nursing home option was really that bad. He said Marge had lived a full life. He said at her age, maybe it was better to let nature take its course. He actually said that. Let nature take its course. Like watching someone suffocate slowly over 3 months was somehow more natural than fixing the problem. Karen jumped in. She said hospice care was free. She said it was designed for situations exactly like this. She said making Marge comfortable in her final months was a compassionate choice. She kept using the word compassionate, like she was trying to convince herself. Brad, who nobody asked, said that $150,000 was not a reasonable expense for someone in their 70s. He said it was not a sound financial decision. He said insurance companies deny claims for a reason. My mother just looked at me with this expression that said, please do not make this harder than it already is. Dr. Amon watched this conversation like she had seen it 1,000 times before. She probably had. This was not a medical consultation anymore. This was a family deciding what a life was worth in dollars and whether they wanted to pay it. Sarah's hand found mine. Her fingers were cold. I looked at Dr. Amon and asked how long we had to decide. She said they would need an answer by morning. They could keep Marge in the ICU until then. But after that, they would need to move her to make room for other patients, either to a surgical prep room or to a transport van heading to whatever facility we chose. Karen stood up. She said we should all sleep on it, but that the responsible choice was obvious. She said Marge would not want us to bankrupt ourselves. She said there was no point in throwing money at a problem we could not fix permanently, because eventually something else would go wrong. She looked right at me when she said that, like she knew, like she had already done the math. I asked if I could see Marge. Dr. Amon looked relieved to leave the room. She led me down a hallway that smelled like antibacterial everything in fear. The ICU was a maze of beeping machines and people in various states of falling apart. Marge was in a corner bay. She had tubes coming out her arms and a clip on her finger measuring her oxygen and a monitor showing her heart rhythm doing its irregular dance. Her skin looked gray under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes were closed, but she was breathing. Her chest went up and down. Steady, stubborn. I stood there watching her breathe and thought about the manila folder in my glove compartment. Sarah appeared next to me. She did not say anything. She just stood there with her hand in mine. Both of us watching this woman who wore ridiculous scarves and believed in quantum manifestation and had loved me without expecting anything back. My father found us. He put his hand on my shoulder in that way that is supposed to be comforting but feels like pressure. He told me I needed to be realistic. He told me that $150,000 was our entire future. He told me Marge had lived a good life and that sometimes you had to make hard choices. I asked him how much his life was worth. He did not answer. Karen cornered me in the hallway, while Sarah went to get coffee from a vending machine that probably dispensed liquid regret. Karen used her I am being reasonable voice, the one she uses on her kids when she wants them to comply without questioning. She told me not to be an idiot. She told me Marge would die eventually anyway, and this was just postponing the inevitable. She told me to think about my future, my marriage, my chance at finally having something. She told me that hospice was not giving up. It was being realistic. She told me that if I spent that money, I would regret it for the rest of my life. She told me this was natural selection, and I needed to accept it. Natural selection. Like we were animals, and this was a wilderness, and the weak were supposed to die, so the strong could have more resources. I went back to the ICU. I sat in a chair next to Marge's bed. The machines beeped. The monitors tracked numbers I did not understand. A nurse came in and checked her vitals and gave me a sad smile that said she had seen this episode before and knew how it ended. I pulled out my phone. I opened my photos. I scrolled back 3 years until I found it. The picture of the medical power of attorney. I had photographed it that day in Marge's kitchen, mostly as a way to remember where I put the physical document. Now I stared at it on my screen. Her signature in careful cursive. My signature looking rushed by comparison. The official stamp from the notary public. This piece of paper meant I got to decide. Not my parents. Not Karen. Me. Dr. Rahman came back around 2 in the morning. She asked if we had made a decision. My parents had gone home. Karen had gone home. It was just me and Sarah in that waiting room with the bad coffee and the television, playing news. Nobody was watching. I showed Dr. Rahman the photo on my phone. I told her I had medical power of attorney. I told her I was making the decision. I told her we were doing the surgery. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked if I understood the financial obligation. I said I did. She asked if I had the funds available. I said I would by morning. She asked if I was sure. I was not sure of anything, except that I could not watch Marge die slowly in a nursing home while I used her death money to buy a house. Dr. Rahman left to start the authorization process. Sarah sat next to me. She had not said a word through any of this. She had just been there, solid and present and real. I turned to her. I told her I was about to spend all of our money. Every single dollar we had saved for 12 years. I told her I would understand if she could not forgive me for this. I told her we could walk away right now and nobody would blame us. She looked at me with eyes that were red from crying or exhaustion or both. She told me that we could buy a house in 10 years, maybe 15, maybe never. But if we did not do this, she would not be able to look at me the same way. She said she would not be able to look at herself in the mirror. She said some things were worth more than houses. Her voice shook when she said it, but she meant it. The financial coordinator arrived at 6 in the morning. Her name was Michelle, and she had clearly drawn the short straw for dealing with the early shift crisis cases. She had a folder full of forms that needed signatures. She walked me through the payment structure. $150,000 due before the procedure. Additional costs for the ICU stay, the anesthesiology team, the surgical staff, the postoperative care. They estimated the total cost could reach $180,000 depending on complications. She asked how I would be paying. I told her I had a certificate of deposit that matured today. She said they would need verification. I said I would call the bank as soon as they opened. Michelle made me sign a document acknowledging that I understood this was not covered by insurance, that I understood I was personally responsible for all charges, that I understood failure to pay could result in collections and legal action. I signed everything. My hand was shaking, but I signed it all. At 8 o'clock, I called First National Bank. The automated system cheerfully informed me that my CD had officially matured and was now available for withdrawal. Press 1 to speak to a representative about your options. I pressed 1. The representative's name was Tom. He sounded young and optimistic, like someone who had not yet learned that the banking system was designed to take more than it gives. He congratulated me on my financial discipline and asked what I planned to do with the funds. I told him I needed to liquidate the entire account and transfer it to County General Hospital's billing department immediately. There was a pause. Tom asked if I was sure. He told me I had several better options for that money, better interest rates, investment opportunities. He could set up a meeting with their financial advisor. I told him my aunt was dying, and I needed the money now. Another pause. Then Tom's voice changed, got quieter, more human. He said he would process the transfer right away. He said it would take about 2 hours for the funds to clear. He said he was sorry about my aunt. I thanked him and hung up. 12 years disappeared in a 2-minute phone call. I sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking coffee that tasted like hot sadness and thought about all the things that money was supposed to be: the house, the vacations, the security, the proof that I had done something right with my life. Sarah sat across from me eating a muffin that neither of us could afford now. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not say anything. She just reached across the table and held my hand. We were broke. We were going to be eating ramen for the next decade. We were going to keep living in that apartment with the thin walls and Greg's digestive issues. We were going to keep driving my car until it literally fell apart on the highway. But Marge was going to live. At 11:30, Michelle found me in the waiting room. The transfer had cleared. The hospital had received payment in full. They were prepping Marge for surgery now. Dr. Ramon wanted to meet with me before they took her in. I went back to the ICU. They had already started the pre-op process. Marge was slightly more awake now, groggy but aware. She looked at me with confusion and something like fear. Dr. Ramon told her what was going to happen, that they were going to fix her heart, that she was going to be okay. Marge's eyes found mine, and I saw the question there. I told her not to worry about anything. I told her we had it covered. I told her to just focus on waking up after. She tried to say something, but the medication was making her words fuzzy. I think she was trying to say thank you, or maybe she was trying to tell me not to do this. I will never know. They wheeled her out at noon. I walked alongside the gurney until we reached the surgical wing doors. Sarah was on the other side. We stood there as they pushed Marge through those double doors into the bright lights and the sterile air in the place where they would either save her life, or I would have to live with the fact that I had spent our entire future on a gamble that did not pay off. The doors swung shut. I could see them through the small windows. Getting her situated, the surgical team moving with practiced efficiency. Then an orderly came and closed the privacy curtains. And just like that, she was gone, swallowed up by a system that measured lives and billable hours and prior authorizations. I stood there staring at those closed doors. Sarah's hand found mine again. We had nothing left. No savings. No safety net. No plan B. Just debt and hope and the fading sound of a heart monitor somewhere behind those walls. I thought about my father saying let nature take its course. I thought about Karen saying this was natural selection. I thought about Brad calling it an unsound financial decision. And I thought about Marge in her yellow scarf, smiling like she knew a secret, telling us the universe had already written her a check. The mail was just delayed. The elevator dinged behind us. I turned and watched as they wheeled Marge's gurney inside. The surgical team surrounded her. Dr. Ramon caught my eye through the closing doors and gave a small nod. Then the elevator doors slid shut, and she was gone, ascending toward whatever came next. I stood there in the hallway with my wife and my empty bank account, and the crushing weight of a choice I could not take back. The doors closed, and all I could do was wait. 6 weeks after the surgery, our apartment smelled like cheap pasta and medical supplies. Marge was sleeping in what used to be our home office, which was really just a corner of the living room where we had optimistically set up a desk that neither of us use anymore because we were too tired to have hobbies. The recovery was going better than anyone expected. Dr. Rahman had said Marge might need months of rehabilitation, but my aunt was apparently too stubborn to follow a normal healing timeline. She was walking without assistance by week 4. By week 5, she was complaining about our coffee being too weak. By week 6, she was doing chair yoga while watching YouTube videos on her tablet that Sarah had set up for her. But living with 3 adults in a 1-bedroom apartment designed for 2 was its own kind of torture. We had sold everything that was not essential. Sarah's good jewelry went to a pawn shop and came back as $300 that paid for medications. My collection of vinyl records that I had been building since college got listed on eBay and turned into grocery money. We canceled every subscription service. Netflix, Spotify, even the newspaper delivery that Sarah loved reading on Sunday mornings. We ate a lot of pasta, spaghetti with butter, spaghetti with cheap sauce, spaghetti with canned vegetables. I got real creative with pasta. I became a pasta artist, a pasta architect, a pasta philosopher contemplating the meaning of carbohydrates. Sarah started mending our clothes instead of replacing them. I watched her one night, sitting under the lamp with a needle and thread, carefully stitching a hole in her favorite jeans. She used to just buy new ones. Now she was doing repairs like our grandparents did during the Depression. We told Marge that insurance had covered everything. We told her Medicare came through in the end. We told her not to worry about the bills because everything was handled. We lied to her every single day with smiles on our faces while we calculated whether we could afford both laundry detergent and toilet paper in the same week. I think she knew. I think she knew from day one. But she played along because calling us out would have made it worse. Marge recovered with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. Every follow-up appointment, Dr. Rahman looked surprised. The surgical site healed perfectly. Her heart function improved beyond expectations. Her energy levels came back. It was like installing that new valve had reset her entire system. But she noticed things. Of course she noticed things. She noticed when the cable got shut off and we told her we were trying a digital detox. She noticed when I started walking to work instead of driving, and we said it was for exercise. She noticed when Sarah started bringing home leftovers from her office potlucks that definitely did not exist. One evening, about 7 weeks post-op, I came home from work to find Marge sitting at our tiny kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her. Hospital bills, EOB statements, financial documents that we had tried to hide in a drawer but clearly had not hidden well enough. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Actual tears. I had never seen Marge cry. Not at funerals. Not at sad movies. Not ever. She told me she knew we were lying. She said she had seen the bills. She said she had been watching us eat pasta for 6 weeks straight while telling her we just really loved Italian food. She said she knew we had given up everything for her. She asked me directly, did we spend all of it, every dollar we had saved? I could not lie to her anymore. Not while she was sitting there with tears running down her face and my financial ruin spread out on the table in front of her. So I told her the truth. I told her about the $150,000. I told her about liquidating the CD. I told her about the house we would never buy. She cried harder. She put her face in her hands and sobbed in a way that made my chest hurt. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Sarah came home and found us like that. Marge crying, me sitting there feeling like I had somehow failed even though I had done the right thing. Sarah did not ask what happened. She just went to Marge and hugged her and told her it was okay, that we would figure it out, that what mattered was she was alive. After Marge finally stopped crying, she got this look on her face, determined, focused, the same look she probably had when she organized library books by some system only she understood. She told me she needed me to do something for her. She needed me to go to her empty house that we had been meaning to deal with but kept putting off because we were too exhausted from everything else. She gave me very specific instructions. Go to her bedroom, open the closet. On the top shelf, behind some old shoe boxes, there was a blue and white tin that used to hold Danish butter cookies. She needed me to bring it to her. I drove to Marge's house on a Thursday afternoon, using gas money I really should not have been spending. The house had been sitting empty for almost 2 months. The neighbor had been checking on it, keeping the mail from piling up, but otherwise it was just sitting there like a time capsule of a life interrupted. The key stuck in the lock. It always did. Inside, the air smelled stale and dusty. The lavender scent that usually filled the place had faded. Everything looked exactly the way Marge had left it the night her heart decided to quit. A mug on the kitchen counter, a book face down on the coffee table, reading glasses on the side table. I felt like an intruder in a museum dedicated to my aunt's life. Her bedroom was exactly where it had always been. The closet was packed with clothes in colors that should not exist in nature. Bright purple blazers, orange cardigans, that turquoise scarf that had offended my mother at Christmas. The top shelf was a mess of shoe boxes and storage containers, and things that had been shoved up there over decades. I found the blue and white tin behind a box of winter scarves. Royal Dansk, the cookies that come in those tins that everyone's grandmother had, filled with sewing supplies, or old photos, or buttons. I pulled it down. It was lighter than I expected. I sat on Marge's bed and opened the tin. No cookies. Obviously no cookies. The tin probably had not held actual cookies since 1987. Instead, there were newspaper clippings, articles about positive thinking and manifestation, and the law of attraction, some printed pages about quantum physics that looked like they had been copied from library books, bobby pins and paper clips mixed in like they were part of some organizational system I did not understand. And underneath all of it, a single lottery ticket, Powerball. The paper was slightly yellowed. The numbers were printed in that distinctive font they use. A date from 2 months ago, right around the time Marge had collapsed on her porch. I stared at it like it might suddenly make sense. Why was there a lottery ticket in a cookie tin full of manifestation articles and random hardware store debris? I drove back to the apartment with the tin on my passenger seat, trying to figure out what this meant. Marge had never mentioned buying lottery tickets. She barely had money for groceries. Why would she waste even $2 on something with odds worse than getting struck by lightning twice while being attacked by a shark? When I got home, Marge was sitting up straighter than she had in weeks. She looked at the tin like I was carrying the Holy Grail. Her hands shook when she took it from me. She opened it slowly, carefully, like she was defusing a bomb. She pulled out the lottery ticket, just held it there, staring at it, her hands trembling. Then she told me a story that made absolutely no sense and perfect sense at the same time. She said she had bought the ticket on a whim. One ticket, $2. She had been doing her visualization exercises and felt compelled to buy one specific ticket with specific numbers that had come to her during meditation. She knew it sounded crazy. She knew what the family thought of her beliefs, but she bought it anyway. She said she had checked the numbers online the night she collapsed. She said she was sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open, comparing the numbers on her ticket to the winning numbers on the Powerball website. She said she checked 3 times because she could not believe what she was seeing. Every single number matched. She said her heart started racing. She said she felt this wave of pure joy and shock and disbelief wash over her. She said she stood up from the table and felt this pain in her chest like someone had reached in and grabbed her heart and squeezed. She barely made it to the porch before she collapsed. The cardiac event. The thing that almost killed her. It was not stress or age or bad luck. It was literally too much happiness. Her heart could not handle winning the lottery, and it just gave up. She said she spent the entire ambulance ride and the first hours in the hospital terrified that she would die before she could tell anyone about the ticket, that we would clean out her house and throw away that cookie tin and never know. I looked at this woman, my aunt who believed in quantum manifestation and cosmic abundance and all the stuff my family had mocked for decades. I looked at her holding a lottery ticket in her shaking hands, and I did not know whether to laugh or cry or check myself into the psychiatric ward. She asked me to verify it. She asked me to pull out my phone and check the numbers. She said she needed to know she had not hallucinated the whole thing in her medicated state. I took out my phone, hands shaking almost as bad as hers. I opened the browser and searched for Powerball winning numbers, found the date on the ticket, pulled up the official results. I read the winning numbers out loud. 6 numbers, slowly, carefully, comparing each one to the ticket in Marge's hand. First number matched. Coincidence. Lots of tickets match one number. Second number matched. Okay, still possible. Third number matched. My heart started beating faster. Fourth number matched. My hands were definitely shaking now. Fifth number matched. Sarah came to stand behind me, looking over my shoulder at my phone. Sixth number matched. The Powerball number matched. I stared at my phone screen. The numbers blurred. My pupils dilated so wide the room looked different. I looked up at Marge. She was smiling. That same knowing smile she had at the barbecue when Karen laughed at her. The smile that said she knew something the rest of us did not. She asked me how many zeros there were. Her voice was steady now, almost amused, like she had been waiting 2 months to ask that question. I could not speak. I looked back at the screen. The jackpot amount was printed right there under the winning numbers. $236 million. Sarah made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a scream. I just sat there. My brain had completely stopped processing information. I looked at the ticket, looked at my phone, looked at Marge, looked at Sarah, looked at the ticket again. This could not be real. This did not happen to real people. This happened in movies and fake social media stories and those emails from Nigerian princes. But I was holding the ticket, the winning ticket, worth $236 million. Marge reached out and took my hand. She told me that the universe had a sense of humor, that she had been manifesting abundance for decades and everyone thought she was crazy, that she had almost died before she could tell us, that we had saved her life with the very money this ticket would replace 100 times over. She asked if we believed in cosmic justice now. I want to tell you we jumped up and down and screamed and celebrated. That would be a lie. We just sat there in shock for what felt like hours. Sarah kept saying this is not real over and over. I kept checking the numbers again. Marge just sat there with that peaceful smile, like she had known all along how this would end. Finally, after the shock started to wear off, I asked the practical question, what do we do now? Do we just show up at lottery headquarters with a ticket and collect a giant check like in commercials? Marge, who had spent her entire life barely scraping by on a librarian pension, suddenly became the most financially sophisticated person in the room. She said we needed a lawyer, a good one. She said we needed to set up a trust. She said we needed to protect ourselves before anyone found out. She said this with the authority of someone who had clearly been planning for this moment while recovering in our apartment. We did not sleep that night. We spent hours researching what to do when you win the lottery. Turns out, most lottery winners go bankrupt within a few years. They get sued by family members. They get harassed by strangers. They make terrible financial decisions because suddenly having money does not mean you suddenly know how to handle money. The internet was full of horror stories. People who won millions and lost everything. People whose families turned on them. People who wished they had never won at all. Marge read every article with us. Then she said she wanted the best trusts and estates attorney in the state. She did not care what it cost. She said we were going to do this right. 3 days later, we sat in an office that cost more per hour than I used to make in a week. The lawyer's name was Patricia Brennan, and she had the kind of reputation that made other lawyers nervous. She listened to our story without expression. Then she laid out a strategy. We would create a blind trust. Marge would be the lottery winner on paper, but the trust would be structured so the beneficiaries were Marge, Sarah, and me. This would preserve as much anonymity as possible, though she warned us that some states require lottery winners to be publicly identified. The trust would claim the prize. We would take the cash option, which was approximately $115 million after federal taxes. The trust would manage the assets. We would receive distributions that kept us comfortable but not stupid. Patricia said the setup would cost $60,000. I almost laughed. 2 months ago, $60,000 would have destroyed us. Now it was a rounding error. We signed papers. So many papers. Patricia filed documents. She coordinated with the Lottery Commission. She set up accounts and structures and legal protections that I barely understood. The whole process took 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, we told no one, not my parents, not Karen, not even Greg next door, who definitely would have overheard the celebrations through our thin walls. Then the money hit the trust account. $115 million. Real. Verified. Ours. I checked the balance 3 times a day for the first week. The number never changed. It just sat there, being impossible, being real. We still lived in our apartment. We still ate pasta, though now by choice rather than necessity. Sarah said we should wait before making big changes, that we needed time to process everything without the pressure of people knowing. But word started to leak out anyway. A reporter somehow found out where the winning ticket had been sold. Marge's small suburb made local news. Neighbors started speculating about who might have won. Someone must have seen us meeting with lawyers. Someone must have noticed something. 2 weeks after we claimed the prize, my parents and Karen showed up at our door. They did not call first. They did not bring flowers or wine or any of the things people bring when they visit family. They brought a lawyer. My father did not bother with small talk. He said they had heard rumors. He said they knew about the lottery ticket. He said they were concerned about Marge's mental capacity to handle such a large financial windfall given her recent medical issues. Karen's lawyer, a weasel-faced man in an expensive suit, explained that they were filing for conservatorship. He said that someone who had just undergone major cardiac surgery and had a history of making questionable financial decisions clearly needed family oversight to protect her interests. He actually said protect her interests, like they gave a single damn about Marge's interests when they were ready to dump her in hospice 2 months ago. My mother added that of course they would make sure Marge was taken care of, that she would have the best care money could buy, that they just wanted to make sure she was safe. She said this while literally filing paperwork to take control of Marge's assets. I started to lose my temper. Sarah grabbed my arm. But before I could say anything, Marge appeared from the bedroom. She was wearing one of her ridiculous scarves, bright purple with gold threads. She looked like royalty. She walked to our small dining table where my family had spread out their legal documents like they were planning a hostile takeover. She did not say a word. She just pulled out a manila envelope from the large purse she was carrying and placed it on the table. Inside was a psychological evaluation, fresh, dated 3 days ago, from one of the top psychiatric assessment facilities in the state. It stated in clinical, professional language that Marge was a completely sound mind, excellent cognitive function for her age, no signs of dementia, diminished capacity, or impaired judgment, fully capable of making her own financial and medical decisions. Patricia Brennan had insisted we get it done the day the trust was finalized, just in case. Just in case the family came circling like vultures when they smelled money. Karen's lawyer looked at the report. His expression went from confident to concerned to defeated in about 30 seconds. My father started to argue, started to say that Marge was clearly being manipulated by us, that she was not thinking clearly, that family should handle family matters. Marge held up one hand. She told them to be quiet. Her voice was not loud, but it had this steel in it I had never heard before. She said she had something to say, and they were going to listen. She told them that 2 months ago, they had valued her life at exactly $0, that they had been prepared to watch her die slowly in a nursing home, so they could inherit her house a few months early, that they had not visited her once during her recovery, because they had already written her off as a bad investment. She said she had been listening to them talk about her like a burden for decades, like she was an embarrassment, like her beliefs and her life choices were some kind of failure that reflected badly on them. She said that when she was dying, the only people who showed up were me and Sarah. The only people willing to sacrifice anything were me and Sarah. And now that she had money, suddenly she needed their protection and oversight. Then she made them an offer. She said she would pay off all of their debts. Every single one. My father's second mortgage, Karen's credit cards, their car payments, medical bills, everything. She would write checks that day and clear their slates completely. But there was a condition, one condition that was non-negotiable. They would sign legal documents waiving any and all claims to her money, her property, her medical decisions, or her attention for the rest of her life. A complete release. No inheritance rights. No contest clauses. A restraining order if they violated the terms. They would take the money and leave her alone forever. My mother looked at my father. Karen looked at her husband. The lawyer looked at his clients like he knew this was a court and he was already losing. They tried to negotiate. Of course they tried. My father said that was too harsh. That family should not be treated like strangers. Karen said Marge was being manipulated by grief and trauma, that she did not really want to cut off her own family. Marge asked them how much they thought they would get from her estate if she died tomorrow. She asked them to name a number. Karen started to speak, but Marge cut her off. She said she knew exactly what they had calculated. She had overheard them discussing it at the hospital while she was supposedly unconscious. She told them her offer was probably more than they would have inherited anyway. Take it or leave it. She gave them 24 hours to decide. They left. The lawyer packed up his briefcase. Karen was crying, but it was not sad crying. It was angry crying. The kind where you realize you've been outplayed in your own game. My parents did not say goodbye. They signed the papers 18 hours later. Patricia Brennan handled everything. Marge wrote checks that cleared their debts. In return, they gave up any claim to her life. Legal documents. Notarized. Binding. My mother tried to hug Marge before they left Patricia's office. Marge stepped back. She told my mother that she hoped the money brought them happiness, but that they would not be bringing her any. She said this without anger. Just fact. That was the last time I saw my parents or Karen. They got their money. They got their debts cleared. And we got peace. A year later, we bought a house. Not a mansion. Not some ridiculous display of wealth. Just a normal house in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard for Marge to plant a garden. 3 bedrooms. Good bones. A kitchen where Sarah could cook without hitting her elbows on the walls. Marge insisted on paying for everything outright. No mortgage. She said mortgages were for people who did not believe in abundance. We tried to argue, but she had already written the check. We also started a foundation. The Marge Foundation for Medical Accessibility. It paid for surgeries for people whose insurance companies denied coverage. It helped families who had to choose between medical care and bankruptcy. We hired people who understood how to fight insurance companies and how to navigate the healthcare system. In the first year, we funded 43 life-saving procedures that insurance had denied. 43 people who got to live because we remembered what it felt like to have no options. I am sitting on our back porch right now. It is a Sunday morning. Sarah's inside making coffee that is not the cheapest brand at the store. Marge is in the garden, wearing a bright orange sun hat that looks like a traffic cone, talking to her tomato plants about positive vibrations. Sometimes I think about that certificate of deposit, about 12 years of saving, about the house we thought we wanted, about the life we planned so carefully that evaporated in a single hospital visit. If I had not spent that money, if I had listened to my family, if I had made the practical choice, Marge would be dead, and we would be living in a house built on the foundation of a choice we could never take back. Marge was right about the universe having a sense of humor. She spent decades believing in cosmic abundance, while living on almost nothing. She manifested wealth while everyone mocked her, and when her heart literally could not handle winning the lottery, the only people who could save her were the ones who did not need proof to believe in her. The universe does not reward people who ask. It rewards people who give. It rewards people who make impossible choices because they're the right choices, even when the math does not work out. We gave everything we had, and we got everything back, plus interest, plus a garden full of tomatoes that Marge swears grow better when you play them classical music. Sarah brings me coffee. Real coffee. Good coffee. She sits next to me, and we watch Marge talking to vegetables like they are her therapists. Greg is not our neighbor anymore. We do not have thin walls. We do not have a check engine light that has been on for years. But I still drive that Honda Civic sometimes. It is in the garage, fully repaired, check engine light finally off. I keep it because it reminds me that the best things in life come from the moments when you give up everything practical for something impossible. Marge looks up from her garden and waves. She is wearing that purple scarf again. The one she wore to the hospital. The one she wore when she beat my family at their own game. She smiles like she knows a secret. And maybe she does. Maybe she always did. The universe already wrote the check. The mail was just delayed.